A millionaire installed a camera to watch his disabled twins. What he saw the poor cleaner do shocked him. Marcus Donovan nearly dropped his $200 coffee mug when he saw what was happening on his phone screen. His hands trembled as he stared at the security app, watching live footage from the nursery camera at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning that would change everything. There were his 3-year-old twin sons, Ethan and Elliot, both diagnosed with severe cerebral palsy 3 years ago. The boys' doctors said would never hold objects, never track movement, never respond with intention. And there was Carmen Silva, the 52-year-old cleaning woman he'd hired 6 weeks ago for $12 an hour to work overnight shifts while everyone slept. But what Marcus saw on that screen defied every medical report, every expensive consultation, every shattered dream he'd carefully locked away in the fortress of his heart. Ethan was holding a soft ball, not dropping it, not letting it roll from limp fingers, holding it with both hands, his small face concentrated in a way Marcus had never seen before. And Elliot, God. Elliot was turning his head deliberately, following Carmen's voice as she moved around the room, singing something soft in Spanish while gently moving his little legs in patterns that looked almost like dancing. "What the hell?" Marcus whispered to the empty penthouse office, his heart hammering against his ribs. He rewound the footage 30 seconds. Watched again. The movements were real, coordinated, intentional. Everything the most expensive pediatric neurologists in New York City had told him was impossible. Carmen wasn't just cleaning. She was doing something, some kind of massage technique combined with movement exercises Marcus had never seen in any of the therapy sessions he'd paid $500 an hour for. Her weathered hands moved with precision and purpose, manipulating Ethan's arms in swimming motions while humming a melody that seemed to hold the boy's complete attention. Marcus's breath came faster. How long had this been happening? He scrolled back through the archived footage, his fingers clumsy with urgency. Last night there. The night before, same thing. A week ago, Carmen spending hours with his sons instead of pushing the industrial vacuum cleaner around his 8,000-square-foot penthouse. 2 weeks of footage, 3 weeks, a month. She'd been doing this the entire time she'd worked for him, and he'd never known because he never reviewed the overnight security recordings. Why would he? He'd installed the cameras after the 9th caregiver stole prescription medication. They were meant to catch theft, negligence, the kind of problems money could solve with a phone call to the employment agency. They weren't meant to catch miracles happening right under his nose, performed by the invisible woman he paid minimum wage to keep his floors clean. Marcus stood abruptly, his leather chair rolling backward and hitting the mahogany bookshelf. Carmen would finish her shift at 6 a.m. 3 hours from now. She'd slip out through the service entrance like she always did, invisible as a ghost, probably headed to her second job at some office building downtown. He pulled up her employee file on his computer. Carmen Silva, age 52. Address in Queens. Emergency contact. Daughter, Isabella Silva. Previous employment, various cleaning services. References checked. Background clear. Work authorization verified. That was it. That was all he knew about the woman who'd been doing something extraordinary with his children for 6 weeks, while he obsessed over quarterly reports and acquisition deals. Marcus looked back at the live feed. Carmen was sitting on the floor now between both boys' therapeutic chairs, holding their hands, speaking to them in Spanish with a gentleness that made something crack in his chest. Ethan was trying to squeeze her fingers. Actually trying. His face scrunched with effort that Marcus had never witnessed in 3 years of watching his sons exist rather than live. "Who are you?" Marcus murmured at the screen, but he knew the real question burning beneath his skin. The one that made shame crawl up his spine like poison. What kind of father installs cameras but never truly sees? What kind of man judges worth by job titles and paychecks, and misses the miracle happening in his own home? Marcus had built Donovan Tech from nothing, turning a college startup into a billion-dollar empire through ruthless efficiency and the ability to spot value before anyone else did. He'd made his fortune recognizing potential in people, ideas, and markets that others overlooked. Yet somehow, he'd completely missed the most valuable person in his own house, the woman who cleaned his toilets, the one he'd never looked directly at during their brief interactions, the one whose name he had to check his phone to remember. That woman was doing something his army of Ivy League specialists had declared impossible. And if what he was seeing on these cameras was real, if this cleaning woman with her worn sneakers and careful English had somehow reached his unreachable sons, then everything Marcus believed about credentials, expertise, and who deserved his trust was about to shatter like glass. Carmen stood up on the screen, stretching her back with a slight wince. She glanced at the clock, 2:55 a.m., then she looked directly at the camera in the corner, and for just a moment, Marcus could swear she knew he was watching. Her expression was calm, peaceful, holding no guilt or fear, just a quiet dignity that made Marcus feel smaller than he'd felt in years. She turned back to the boys, kissing each of their foreheads before adjusting their positions for sleep. "Dulces sueños, mis angelitos," she whispered. "Sweet dreams, my little angels." Then she picked up her cleaning supplies and left the nursery, closing the door softly behind her. Marcus sat in the darkness of his office, staring at his sleeping sons on the screen. Outside his floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glittered with the lights of a city that never stopped moving, never stopped judging, never stopped measuring worth in dollars and degrees. But in that nursery, something priceless had been happening. And the terrifying question Marcus now faced was whether his pride would let him accept help from someone he'd spent 6 weeks looking right through. Tomorrow morning, he'd confront Carmen Silva. He'd demand answers. He'd understand what was happening to his children. But tonight, watching his sons sleep more peacefully than he'd seen in years, Marcus Donovan made himself watch every single night of archived footage. All 6 weeks. Every moment he'd missed because he was too busy building empires to notice the miracle being built 3 floors below his office. But before you find out what Marcus discovered in those recordings, before you see how a billionaire's assumptions nearly destroyed his children's only chance at a real life, you need to understand the story. Subscribe now, because what happens when pride collides with truth will change how you see everyone around you. And trust me, you won't want to miss what Carmen says when Marcus finally asks her the question that matters. Who are you really? Marcus didn't sleep that night. He sat at his desk watching 6 weeks of footage on fast forward, and with each passing hour, the carefully constructed walls around his heart crumbled a little more. 3 years ago, Marcus Donovan had everything a man could want, except the one thing that mattered most. His twin sons, Ethan and Elliot, were born on a Tuesday in May. 10 perfect fingers each. 10 perfect toes. Matching dimples that made the nurses at Mount Sinai Hospital stop mid-rounds just to smile at them. For 6 glorious weeks, Marcus experienced a joy so pure it erased every painful memory of his childhood poverty, his brutal climb to success, even the devastating loss of his wife Sarah, who died from complications during the emergency C-section that saved his sons, but cost him his soulmate. Those 6 weeks felt like a gift from a universe that had finally decided to stop punishing him. Then came the seizures. Ethan first, his tiny body convulsing at 2 a.m. while Marcus held him, screaming for someone to help. Then Elliot 12 hours later. The emergency room visits, the terrified nights, the parade of specialists with their clipboards and their sympathetic head tilts and their increasingly devastating conclusions. Dr. Harrison Mitchell, Manhattan's most renowned pediatric neurologist, the one who charged $800 just for a consultation, delivered the final verdict in his corner office, overlooking Central Park. Severe cerebral palsy, Dr. Mitchell had said, his voice carrying that professionally gentle tone expensive doctor's master in medical school. Both boys. The scans show significant damage. Their motor function will be severely limited. We're looking at lifelong care. Wheelchairs. Feeding tubes possibly by age 5. I'm sorry, Marcus. Sometimes these things just happen. There's no why. There's only what is. Marcus had sat in that leather chair, staring at the diplomas on the wall. Harvard, Johns Hopkins. 20 years of expertise, and felt his entire world collapse into a single, suffocating word. Impossible. Everything he'd dreamed for his sons, teaching them to throw a baseball, watching them run through Central Park, hearing them argue over video games, Seeing them grow into men who'd carry Sarah's laugh and his stubborn determination, all of it evaporated in the space of a 15-minute consultation. But Marcus Donovan hadn't built a billion-dollar empire by accepting impossible. He'd survived a childhood in Detroit where dinner meant whatever the food bank had left. He'd worked 3 jobs to pay for community college, then clawed his way into NYU on pure determination and a scholarship built on code he wrote in public libraries. He'd launched Donovan Tech from his studio apartment, survived bankruptcy twice, outworked and outthought every obstacle that tried to stop him. You don't negotiate with neurology, though. You can't intimidate a diagnosis with quarterly earnings reports. You can't buy your way out of cerebral palsy. Though God knows Marcus tried. $200,000 per year on specialists who came with prestigious credentials and 0 results. Another $150,000 on experimental treatments from Switzerland, Japan, Sweden. Every country with a reputation for medical innovation became Marcus's obsession. He flew in experts who charged more for a consultation than most families made in a year. He converted an entire wing of his penthouse into a private medical facility. $80,000 worth of therapeutic equipment, the kind you'd find in elite rehabilitation centers, installed in a room that looked more like a hospital than a nursery. Specialized chairs, sensory stimulation devices, communication boards with flashing lights and computerized voices. All of it unused. All of it collecting dust while his sons sat strapped in their chairs, staring at nothing, trapped in bodies that wouldn't obey their minds. The caregivers came and went like seasons. 11 of them in 18 months. Each one arriving with impressive resumes and confident promises. Each one leaving or being fired within weeks. The problem wasn't incompetence exactly. It was something worse: pity. Every caregiver looked at Ethan and Elliot and saw tragedy. They saw limitations, medical cases, children to be managed and kept comfortable, while everyone quietly accepted that comfortable was the absolute ceiling of possibility. They followed protocols designed not to heal but to maintain, like hospice care for a death that would take 70 years. Marcus fired the 8th caregiver for reading her phone, while the boys sat in their chairs, unstimulated, ignored. He fired the 9th for stealing prescription anxiety medication. He fired the 10th for suggesting, in a voice dripping with false kindness, that maybe Marcus should start thinking about long-term care facilities where they'd be more comfortable. The 11th one, a woman named Patricia with 30 years of experience and a resume that sparkled with certifications, lasted 3 weeks. She quit after Marcus screamed at her for letting Elliot drool on an $800 therapeutic pillow she'd forgotten to position correctly. "Mr. Donovan," she'd said, her voice shaking as she packed her bag, "I've worked with hundreds of families, but I can't work for someone who's angrier at the world than he is sad for his children. You need therapy more than they do." She'd walked out, and Marcus had stood in that empty nursery, surrounded by equipment that cost more than most people's houses, holding an $800 pillow stained with his son's saliva, and he'd wanted to burn it all down. That's when Margaret Chen, his executive assistant of 12 years, had knocked on his office door with the careful expression she wore when delivering bad news. "Marcus, we need to talk about the caregiver situation. Find someone else. There are thousands of qualified people in this city. You've burned through 11 caregivers. The agencies are starting to blacklist you." Margaret sat down without being invited, which meant she was serious. "You're running out of options. Maybe it's time to adjust expectations. Adjust expectations. Accept reality. Make peace with limitation." Every phrase was a knife, reminding Marcus that his sons would never run, never play, never live the lives he'd dreamed for them during those 6 perfect weeks, that Sarah had died to bring them into a world where they'd be trapped in their own bodies, and there was nothing his money, or his will, or his rage could do about it. "What do you suggest?" His voice came out hollow. Margaret hesitated. The employment agency called with a last-ditch option. Not a medical caregiver. Just someone for overnight supervision and cleaning. Someone to make sure they're safe while they sleep and keep the place maintained. It's not ideal, but how much? $12 an hour. She's overqualified for cleaning but underqualified for medical care. No American credentials. The agency says she has experience with children, but I don't care. Hire her. Marcus turned back to his computer screen, to the numbers and projections that made sense when his sons didn't. Just make sure she doesn't steal anything. And tell her not to touch the medical equipment. Margaret had paused at the door. Her name is Carmen Silva. She starts Monday night. Carmen Silva. Marcus hadn't even bothered to remember the name when she arrived that first Monday at 11 p.m., carrying a small backpack and wearing sneakers so worn he could see her socks through the thinning fabric. He'd given her a 5-minute orientation while barely looking at her. Keep the boys comfortable. Check on them every hour. Don't touch the expensive equipment. Clean the rest of the penthouse during your shift. The service entrance code is 4782. Questions? She'd nodded, her English careful and accented. Yes, Mr. Donovan. I understand. I take good care of them. He'd walked away, dismissing her from his thoughts entirely. Just another employee. Another invisible person, performing invisible labor, while he focused on the empire that actually responded to his control. For 6 weeks, Carmen Silva had arrived at 11 p.m. and left at 6 a.m. through the service entrance. For 6 weeks, Marcus had never once reviewed the overnight security footage because why would he? The cameras were there to catch theft or negligence, not to monitor someone whose job was simply to exist in his house while he slept. For 6 weeks, he'd walked past Carmen in the early mornings when their schedules briefly overlapped, offering nothing more than a distracted nod while she cleaned the kitchen or folded the laundry he left in the dryer. He'd never asked about her life, never wondered why someone her age worked overnight cleaning shifts, never noticed the exhaustion in her eyes or the way she always smiled at his sons, even when Marcus was too busy staring at his phone to see it. And for 6 weeks, 6 entire weeks, Carmen Silva had been performing a miracle in his nursery, while he was too blind, too proud, too wrapped up in his own pain to notice. Now, at 4:30 a.m., Marcus watched the final clip from the previous night. Carmen was singing to Ethan and Elliot, a Spanish lullaby that sounded like water over stones. She was moving their little arms in coordinated patterns, massaging their legs with techniques Marcus had never seen in any of the $500 an hour therapy sessions. And both boys were responding. Not with the blank stares and involuntary spasms Marcus had learned to expect, but with intention, with focus, with something that looked terrifyingly close to joy. Marcus closed his laptop. In 3 hours, Carmen would finish her shift and disappear through the service entrance like she always did. Invisible help, minimum wage labor, someone he'd hired because she was cheap and he'd given up on expensive hope. But nothing about what he'd witnessed in those recordings was cheap. Nothing about the skill in her hands, or the love in her voice, or the impossible progress in his sons was anything less than extraordinary. And Marcus Donovan, who'd built an empire on his ability to spot value before anyone else, realized he'd made the most catastrophic mistake of his life. He'd measured worth in dollars and credentials, and completely missed the miracle happening 3 floors below his office. The question now was whether his pride would survive what he was about to learn, because in 2 hours, Marcus would confront Carmen Silva and discover that sometimes the people we overlook aren't just competent, they're exceptional. And the cost of that blindness? It nearly stole his children's only chance at a real future. What Marcus didn't know yet was that Carmen Silva had a secret one that would force him to confront every assumption he'd used to build his life. And when the truth finally came out, it would bring Manhattan's most ruthless billionaire to his knees. Keep watching, because the conversation that happens next will change everything you think you know about who deserves respect and why. Carmen Silva knew something was wrong the moment she saw Marcus Donovan waiting in the kitchen at 5:47 a.m. In 6 weeks of working overnight shifts, she'd never seen him awake at this hour. He was always in his office until 2 a.m., then disappeared into his master suite until she left through the service entrance at dawn. Their worlds existed on opposite schedules by design, his design, she'd always assumed. Rich people didn't want to see the help. They wanted clean floors and folded laundry to appear like magic while they slept. But there he sat at the marble kitchen island, still wearing yesterday's clothes, his eyes red-rimmed and fixed on her, with an intensity that made Carmen's heart skip. She'd been caught. After 6 weeks of careful work, of stolen hours with Ethan and Elliot, when she should have been vacuuming, of techniques she had no American license to perform after all of it, the cameras had finally betrayed her. Carmen had known about the cameras from day one. She'd seen them in every corner, recording everything, watching for theft or negligence or whatever rich people feared from minimum wage workers. She'd made her peace with being caught eventually. Some things were worth losing a job over. 2-3-year-old boys trapped in bodies that wouldn't obey them? That was worth everything. Miss Silva. Marcus's voice cut through the pre-dawn quiet like a blade. We need to talk about what you've been doing with my children. Carmen set down her cleaning caddy slowly, carefully. Her daughter, Isabella, needed this job's income. They needed every dollar to cover Isabella's college tuition and the medical bills that never stopped coming. But Carmen had made a choice 6 weeks ago, and she'd make it again. Yes, Mr. Donovan. Her English always got worse when she was nervous, the words sticking in her throat like rocks. I know I maybe do something wrong. Wrong? Marcus stood abruptly, and Carmen flinched despite herself. You've been performing unauthorized medical procedures on disabled children. Do you understand how serious that is? Carmen's hands trembled. She wanted to explain, to make him understand, but her English fled like birds from gunshots. The boys. I just want to help them. Help them? Marcus pulled out his phone, swiping through something with sharp, angry gestures. These exercises? These techniques? Who authorized this? Who told you that you, a cleaning woman, should be touching my sons like they're your personal therapy experiment? The words hit Carmen like physical blows. Cleaning woman, personal experiment. Each phrase carefully chosen to remind her of her place, of the distance between them measured in money and education and birth certificates. She'd heard it all before. In Colombia, she'd been Dr. Carmen Silva, respected physical therapist at Hospital Universitario San Ignacio in Bogotá. In America, she was the cleaning lady, the immigrant, the woman who scrubbed other people's toilets because her credentials meant nothing north of the border. But Carmen hadn't survived leaving everything she knew, hadn't worked 3 jobs while studying for impossible licensing exams, hadn't buried her husband and raised her daughter alone just to be intimidated by a rich man's anger. She lifted her chin and met Marcus Donovan's eyes directly. Mr. Donovan, she said quietly, before you fire me, you should ask one question. I don't need to ask you anything. Are the boys doing better? The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Marcus's mouth opened, then closed. His jaw worked silently. Carmen pressed forward, her fear transforming into something harder. You watch the cameras, yes? You see Ethan hold the ball? You see Elliot turn his head to my voice? You see them try, Mr. Donovan. Really try for the first time? That's not the point. That is only point. Carmen's voice rose, her accent thickening with emotion. I break your rules, yes. I do things I have no American paper to do. But your boys, they are getting better. So you tell me you want to fire the person who break rules, or you want to help your sons. Marcus stared at her, his face flushing red. You don't have qualifications to make that kind of decision. You're a cleaning lady, not a doctor. In my country, I was doctor. The words burst out of Carmen before she could stop them. In Colombia, I was physical therapist for 15 years. I work at Hospital Universitario San Ignacio in Bogotá, best rehabilitation center in South America. I treat hundreds of children with cerebral palsy, with brain injuries, with conditions your expensive doctors say are impossible to fix. The silence that followed was so complete Carmen could hear the refrigerator humming. Could hear Marcus's breathing shift from anger to something else entirely. What did you just say? Carmen's hands were shaking, but she'd started this truth and she'd finish it. I graduate from Universidad Nacional de Colombia in 1998. I specialize in pediatric neurological rehabilitation. For 15 years, I help children like your sons. Then my husband die, and Isabella gets sick. And we come to America for treatment. But my credentials, they don't transfer. The licensing exams, they cost thousands of dollars. The English requirement, the American medical terminology, she stopped, took a breath. I try to pass the exams 3 times. 3 times I fail because my English is not perfect. Because I cannot afford the preparation courses. Because I work 3 jobs to pay for Isabella's medicine, and I have no time to study. So yes, Mr. Donovan, I clean your house. I clean toilets in office buildings. I clean floors in hospital where I used to be colleague, not janitor. But I am still physical therapist, in my head, in my hands, in my heart. I just have no paper to prove it in your country. Marcus sank back onto the kitchen stool, his face draining of color. You were a doctor? Physical therapist. 15 years. Carmen pulled out her phone with trembling fingers, navigating to a folder she'd kept since leaving Colombia. I show you. She slid the phone across the marble countertop. Marcus picked it up, staring at the images on the screen. Carmen, in blue scrubs, standing with a team of medical professionals. Carmen receiving an award from the Colombian Health Ministry. Carmen working with children in a bright, modern facility that looked nothing like someone's cleaning caddy. Hospital Universitario San Ignacio, Carmen said softly. You can Google it. Very famous in South America for neuroplasticity research. We publish studies about treating cerebral palsy with early intervention techniques. Everything your doctors here say is impossible. We do every day in Bogotá. The only difference is, there. People listen to me. Here, they see my accent and my cleaning uniform, and they already know everything about who I am. Marcus scrolled through the images, his hands unsteady. When he looked up, his expression had shifted from anger to something Carmen couldn't quite read. Confusion? Shame? She didn't know rich people well enough to tell. Why didn't you tell me this when I hired you? His voice came out hoarse. Why didn't you say you had these qualifications? Carmen almost laughed. But it would have come out bitter. Mr. Donovan, you give me 5-minute interview. You never look at my face. You tell me. Don't touch the equipment. Here is the code. Any questions? You are very busy, very important. I am just the cleaning lady who costs $12 an hour. Why would you listen to me? The accusation landed like a punch. Marcus flinched, actually flinched, and Carmen felt a small, mean satisfaction before guilt washed it away. She wasn't cruel. She'd just spent too many years being invisible to people who should have seen her. When I see your boys, Carmen continued, her voice gentler now, I see exactly what is wrong, and exactly what can help. The diagnosis, the prognosis, I have seen it hundreds of times, and I know that if someone work with them now, while they are young, while their brains are still forming new pathways, they can improve so much more than your doctors believe. So, you just decided to treat them without telling anyone? I decide that I cannot watch children suffer when I have knowledge to help them. Carmen met his eyes steadily. You can fire me, Mr. Donovan. You can report me for practicing without American license. But I will never be sorry for giving your sons a chance that nobody else is giving them. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He looked like a man whose entire world was rearranging itself in real time. And he couldn't find solid ground. Finally, he said, if you're so qualified, prove it. Dr. Mitchell, the neurologist who diagnosed the boys, is coming here today at 2 p.m. If he examines them and confirms real progress, we'll discuss this. If not... He paused, his jaw tight. If not, you're fired, and I'll make sure every agency in the city knows you performed unauthorized treatments on vulnerable children. Carmen felt ice in her veins. Dr. Mitchell. She'd seen his name on the medical reports in the boys' room. One of the most prestigious pediatric neurologists in New York. A man who would take one look at her lack of American credentials and dismiss everything she'd accomplished. But Ethan and Elliot deserved better than her fear. Okay, she said simply. Dr. Mitchell will see what I see. The boys will show him. Then we have nothing more to discuss. Marcus stood, his posture rigid with defensive pride. You can finish your shift. I'll see you this afternoon. He walked away, his footsteps echoing in the vast penthouse, leaving Carmen alone in the kitchen with her cleaning caddy and her racing heart. She had 8 hours before Dr. Mitchell arrived. 8 hours before a man with prestigious degrees and expensive credentials would examine the progress she'd made with nothing but her hands, her knowledge, and her stubborn refusal to accept that impossible meant permanent. Carmen looked toward the nursery where Ethan and Elliot were still sleeping. She'd spent 6 weeks building trust with those boys, teaching their bodies new patterns, showing their brains new pathways. She'd given them her nights, her energy, her hope when everyone else, including their father, had given them up. And now, a single doctor's opinion would determine whether that hope lived or died. Carmen picked up her phone and scrolled to a contact she'd saved months ago, but never called. Dr. Patricia Williams, Chief of Pediatric Neurology at Harlem Children's Hospital. They'd met at a community health fair where Carmen was volunteering. Dr. Williams had been impressed by Carmen's knowledge, had even offered to write a recommendation letter for her licensing exams. Carmen had been too proud, too ashamed of her 3 failures to accept. Now, she pressed call. If Marcus Donovan wanted proof, she'd give him proof that even his prejudice couldn't deny. Because sometimes the people society overlooks aren't just competent, they're exceptional. And the ones who underestimate them? They're about to learn the most expensive lesson of their lives. What happened next would force Marcus to choose between his pride and his children's future. And when Dr. Mitchell arrived that afternoon, what he discovered in that nursery would shatter every assumption about credentials, competence, and who really deserves to be called a doctor. But here's what nobody expected. Carmen had been documenting everything. Every session. Every improvement. Every single moment. And she wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. Stay watching because the confrontation that's about to happen will leave you speechless. Chapter 4. The Evidence. Dr. Harrison Mitchell arrived at exactly 2 p.m., carrying his leather medical bag and the kind of confidence that comes from 30 years of never being wrong. Marcus watched from the living room as Margaret escorted the doctor through the penthouse. Mitchell looked exactly like he always did, impeccably tailored suit, silver hair, perfectly styled, the subtle smugness of a man who charged $800 just to show up. What Mitchell didn't know was that he was walking into an ambush. Carmen had spent the morning preparing Ethan and Elliot, talking to them in that soft Spanish-English mix she used, promising them they'd show the fancy doctor what brave, strong boys they were. She'd changed from her cleaning clothes into simple black pants and a white blouse, still clearly working class, but professional enough to blur the lines Marcus had drawn so carefully in his mind. And she wasn't alone. At 1:30 p.m., a black woman in her 50s had arrived at the penthouse, introducing herself as Dr. Patricia Williams, Chief of Pediatric Neurology at Harlem Children's Hospital. Marcus had been so shocked, he'd almost refused to let her in. Carmen had called in reinforcements without his permission, which should have enraged him. Instead, he felt something uncomfortably close to respect. "Dr. Mitchell," Marcus said, shaking the neurologist's hand. "Thank you for coming on short notice." Of course, Marcus. You sounded concerned on the phone." Mitchell's eyes swept the living room, landing briefly on Dr. Williams with the polite curiosity of someone trying to place an unexpected guest. "I wasn't aware we'd have company." Dr. Patricia Williams, Harlem Children's Hospital. Patricia extended her hand with a smile that held steel beneath its warmth. "Carmen Silva asked me to consult on this case. I hope that's not a problem." Mitchell's handshake was perfunctory, his smile tight. Marcus could practically see him recalibrating, wondering why a community hospital doctor was at a private consultation for a billionaire's children. "Shall we?" Marcus gestured toward the nursery, his heart hammering against his ribs. The 5 of them entered the room: Marcus, Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Williams, Carmen, and Margaret, who'd insisted on being present to take notes. Ethan and Elliot sat in their therapeutic chairs, their eyes bright and alert in a way that made Marcus's chest ache. When had they started looking so alive? "Well," Mitchell said, setting down his bag with practiced efficiency, "let's see what we have here." Marcus mentioned some concerns about unconventional treatments? "Concerns about progress," Carmen corrected quietly. "The boys are improving." Mitchell's expression flickered with something between amusement and condescension. "Miss? Dr. Silva," Patricia interjected smoothly. "Dr. Carmen Silva, formerly of Hospital Universitario San Ignacio in Bogotá, 15 years specializing in pediatric neurological rehabilitation, The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Mitchell turned to Carmen with new eyes, not respectful exactly, but wary. "I wasn't aware the family had hired an additional therapist." "She's our cleaning lady," Marcus said, and immediately hated himself for how those words sounded. "Was our cleaning lady. She's been working with the boys without authorization." One. She's been working with the boys. One. She's been working with the boys without authorization. "I see." Mitchell pulled out his tablet, his demeanor shifting into professional mode. "Well, let's have a look, shall we?" What happened next would replay in Marcus's mind for years. Dr. Mitchell started with Ethan, conducting the same neurological exam Marcus had witnessed a dozen times. Reflex tests, response to stimuli, motor function assessment. The routine was familiar, almost boring, except this time, everything was different. When Mitchell tested Ethan's grip strength with a reflex hammer, the boy grabbed it. Not the loose, reflexive grasp Marcus remembered from previous exams. A real grip. Purposeful and sustained. Mitchell frowned. Interesting. That's not in the previous reports. He moved to test Elliot, holding up a red ball and moving it left to right. Elliot's eyes tracked the movement smoothly, his head turning to follow. Mitchell made a note on his tablet. "What does mean?" Marcus demanded. "It means there's been improvement." Mitchell's voice carried a defensive edge. Unexpected improvement. Given the severity of the original diagnosis. Unexpected or impossible. Patricia stepped forward, her voice gentle but pointed. "Because I believe your initial assessment predicted no significant motor development." Mitchell's jaw tightened. "Dr. Williams, I'm sure you understand that diagnoses made in early infancy can be difficult to—" "Can I show you something?" Carmen interrupted. She knelt beside Ethan's chair, holding out a soft ball. "Ethan, mi amor, can you take this for me?" The room held its breath. Ethan reached out slowly, with effort, his little face concentrated with determination, and took the ball with both hands. He held it to his chest, looking up at Carmen with pride radiating from his eyes. Marcus felt tears burning his throat. "Now watch." Carmen gently took the ball back and rolled it across the floor toward Elliot's chair. "Elliot, can you show the doctors?" Elliot made a sound, not quite a word, but intentional, communicative. He leaned forward in his chair, his arms extending toward the ball, with coordination that shouldn't exist, according to every medical report Marcus had memorized. Dr. Mitchell stood frozen, his tablet forgotten in his hand. "When was your last examination?" Patricia asked quietly. 3 months ago." Mitchell's voice had lost its confidence. "These responses. They weren't present then." "No," Carmen said simply. "Because 3 months ago, nobody was teaching them they could do these things." Patricia pulled out her own tablet. "Dr. Mitchell, I've been reviewing the boys' medical files with Dr. Silva's permission. Your initial diagnosis was based on MRI scans taken at 6 weeks old, correct?" "Yes. The scans showed clear indicators of potential cerebral palsy, yes." "But Dr. Mitchell, you're aware of the research on neuroplasticity in early childhood? The brain's ability to form new neural pathways when properly stimulated?" "Of course, but in cases this severe, the cameras Marcus installed to watch his disabled twins captured something he never expected. Proof that the greatest miracles often arrive in the humblest packages, wearing worn-out shoes and speaking with accents that make narrow-minded people dismiss brilliance before they even hear it. Today, the Silva Donovan Center treats over 300 children annually. Dr. Carmen Silva leads a team of 40 specialists from 12 countries, all of them bringing techniques that American medicine is finally humble enough to learn. And 2 boys who were supposed to need wheelchairs are playing on their elementary school soccer team. But here's the truth that should terrify and inspire you in equal measure. There are thousands of Carmen Silvas out there right now. Brilliant people cleaning your offices, driving your Ubers, serving your coffee, people with expertise and knowledge, who've been dismissed because we judge worth by job titles instead of character. And every day we overlook them. We miss miracles that could change everything. So here's your challenge. This week, look at someone you've been looking past. The person who cleans your building. The immigrant working 3 jobs. The person whose accent makes you tune out before they finish speaking. Actually see them. Actually ask about their story. Because Marcus Donovan almost destroyed his children's future by judging a book by its cover. Don't make the same mistake he did. Open your eyes before cameras have to do it for you. If this story changed how you see the people around you, smash that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to remember that competence has no accent, compassion has no price tag, and miracles don't wait for permission from people who've already decided what's impossible. Drop a comment telling us about someone you underestimated who surprised you, because we all have blind spots. The question is whether we're brave enough to admit them. And remember, the next miracle in your life might be waiting behind assumptions you haven't questioned yet. Don't let pride make you miss it. Next video teaser. Next week, a homeless veteran saves a CEO's daughter from a kidnapping. What he asked for in return left everyone speechless and exposed a truth about gratitude that will make you rethink every act of kindness you've ever ignored. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. Trust me, this one will wreck you in the best way possible.